This is literally going to be a video of me talking on how to talk to people. What's up, y'all? Vincent here. So this is part 3 of 4 in my Like the Chat series, where I cover 4 aspects of my self-improvement through the acronym FACE. So being the third aspect, this would be C for calibration. But first, let's backtrack on my personal progress up to this point, right? So the lad, he starts working out a little bit, he starts building a little bit of muscle, and then he wants to start working on his style, and now he appears a little bit more mature and aesthetic, but he still doesn't know how to relate to people properly. Everyone knows that one person who's kind of weird and quirky, and they have that niche interest like a video game or a certain music band or anime or something like that, where they're basically so socially inept that they can't make small talk on anything but that interest. But once you bring that up, they can blabber on it forever because that's basically their entire personality. See, that's how it was back then. I didn't make small talk on small and mundane topics. But if you bring up RuneScape or stupid boy stuff, I'm all ears and mouth. But I wanted to change all of that. I wanted to actually be able to talk to people without being weird. And so that's why I had to learn social calibration. And that means taking in all available context and then adapting it so you can contribute to a conversation in a positive manner. So through this learning process, I've learned 5 main tips and a few tricks behind how to become socially calibrated. Let's get into it. So let's set this video as the application of my tips and tricks. So basically just pretend that I'm talking to you and you're positioned in a way where you would be talking back to me. So tip number 1, and it's very obvious, pay attention. You know, this may be the most obvious tip ever, but a lot of people, they don't actually pay attention to the conversation. They just let themselves get distracted by such mundane things, or they actually don't care about listening to what the other person has to say. But if you actually want to have a good conversation with someone, then you need to pay attention to both the person and their words. So first, let's work on building some good eye contact. When you're having a conversation with someone, you want to be focused on looking at them for most of the time that you're spending together, because this will allow you to maintain focus on both the other person and the conversation. Like for instance, if I were having a conversation with you, I would be respectful if I looked at you while I was talking to you, right? Like it wouldn't be weird if I looked like this when I was talking to you, or if I started bouncing my head around like the DVD logo. No, with eye contact, you do want to hold it with the other person for most of the time that you're talking to them, but you also want to break it every now and then, so you're not like having a staring contest with them. So sometimes, I'll just look down or look up a little bit while I just think about something to say or reflect on what was just said to me, or maybe I'll like react to something that was just said, like maybe laugh or just be like, oh yeah, that's cool, and I will take that chance to break eye contact to make things less awkward. The second part of paying attention is listening intently. That's because a conversation's substance is mainly made up of what things are said and how they're said. And by listening intently, you're building up a mental track of the conversation, so that way you have a good amount of context to further deliberate on points that were made. And this segues into my second tip, expanding the dialogue. As you engage in conversation, there will be a natural point where the conversation usually stops and it falls onto the other person to continue it for a bit. And in video games, it's emphasized as a dialogue tree. Once a conversational stop has been reached, the other person has to decide how to continue it. So they have options such as like asking questions, making statements, or just staying silent. Personally, I would say the best options for expanding dialogue include expanding the previous point, asking follow-up questions, relating back, or switching to a whole new topic altogether. So let me go over a quick example for each one. So let's suppose that we're talking and you bring up the point about how you just started working out recently. So I could go back on that point and expand on it a little bit by saying something like, oh, wow, that's great. It's good to hear that you're working on your health. I could also ask a few follow-up questions such as like, oh, what made you want to start working out now? Or what your general plan is. If I wanted to relate on it, I could bring up my own experience of starting my own fitness journey and talk to you a little bit about why I got into working out initially as well. And after doing any or all of the following and just talking it out for a bit, once we're done, we can switch to another topic. So now that you actually have a chance to contribute to the conversation, let me just quickly go over tonality and speaking. So you want to just make sure you speak loudly enough to be heard, but not loud enough to cause a commotion. So if you're speaking too quietly and no one can hear you, just bump up the volume. Tip number 4, be relatable. Whenever you're having a conversation with someone, you want to make sure that you're both speaking on topics that you're both familiar with to avoid causing confusion and awkwardness. Like something as niche as like say anime, it's great if both of us have that in common and we can go on for hours about it, but it gets weird if you talk to someone who's never watched like Naruto or Attack on Titan. I mean, this is really the whole point of social calibration. It's about keeping the conversation in line with things that can be properly discussed. And tip number 5, use humor when appropriate. It's funny that I bring up the use of humor in actual conversations, but it really is a good tool to spice them up a little bit. Use of good humor is actually a sign of intelligence because it requires good social calibration to be used effectively. This can be done by playing on the words, the context, or the situation you're in. Just make sure your tone reflects that you're trying to be funny or you're trying to make a joke, or otherwise it will be weird. Oh, and definitely make sure you're hydrated so your voice doesn't sound raspy. So just as an example, sometimes like I'll be in a club in Vegas and we'll get to like the topic of age and I'll just start telling people that I'm 18, which is obviously cap because 1, you have to be over 21 to get into these clubs, and 2, you get your ID checked like 3 or 4 times while you're in line. So it's like obviously you're not going to be able to get in as an 18-year-old. But I do say it, to show that I am joking, I'm just rolling with it. But I just back it up enough so that people can react and have like a good laugh at it. So yeah, pretty short video, but those are my 5 tips and tricks that I taught my uncalibrated, socially inept younger self so that he could go from just talking about video games and stupid random crap to actually having full-on conversations with strangers, even at the club. It's been a while coming, but I'm finally going to be concluding this series in the next video by going over the single most important thing that I've learned over my entire journey. As always, if you'd like to support me and my channel as I continue to grow it, you can give this video a like, leave a comment if you have something to say, and subscribe to stay in the loop for any future content that I make. So that's it for this video. I'm out. Bye-bye.